It's been a few weeks since I made a YouTube video. Been trying to figure out what to put on. I've been doing a lot of projects. This is one of them. If some of you have been following me on Instagram, you know I've been working on an 8-foot, can you get a height? Because I'm almost 6 foot, I'm 5'10", 8-foot charcuterie board. This thing is huge. The client wanted this for their business. They do fruit carving and chocolate fountains, so they're going to use this. I still need to put a logo on it. Filled in all the knots. I might put a video together on how I did this. I actually had to go over to my buddy Shane's house to cut this. This came from 2 separate walnut boards that were 10 foot in length, and so we needed to get those nice and square on one edge, join it up and glue it up, and that was a 2-person job. Got Shane Peters helped me out. He's got a 10-foot Laguna Swift CNC, and so we used that. And we put the nice edge on it, then we glued it up together, and then we cut it on his CNC. This would have been a big job. I can barely lift this board. I'm not sure how my client's going to do it. That's her issue, and I've brought that up to her ahead of time, but it's certainly going to be unique. Now here's what I thought you might be interested in, and I thought lots of people would know how to do this, and after talking with some of you, found out that it may not be as obvious as I think. Here's the challenge. My client came to me and told me she wanted an 8-foot charcuterie board that she saw on a Facebook post. She had gone to the company and they said they would not make it for her. They're not making the boards. It was just a social media gimmick kind of thing for the boards that they build, but they didn't want any interest in actually building one for her. So she came to me and I said, sure, I'll build it. Tell me the specifications. She says, well, I don't know what they are, but let me reach out to the company and see if they'll give them to me. All she knew was that the board was 8 foot long. That's the big thing she knew. She didn't know how wide it was. She didn't know how big the handle was or anything else about the board. So after waiting about a week of her trying to find out the dimensions, I said, well, I know how to do that. Why don't I just do it? And so I went into the Facebook picture that she took, which happened to be a pretty straight on picture. It was looking right at the camera, so that was good. That's one of the keys. And I said, I'll just use my Vectric software to scale this up. And then I'll know exactly what size, or within an inch or two, the width is, and the handle and everything else. So I did it. And she's very happy with the dimensions that came out. And I'm fairly confident this is within a 1/2 inch to an inch of the board she wanted. Within the width, she already knew it was exactly 8 foot long. And so therefore, I wanted to take a few minutes, and I never do anything fast, so we'll see how long this video actually takes, to show you how you could take a picture of something and then scale it. And this can come in handy in a number of different ways. For example, I just made a cribbage board on a 3-foot slab that I needed to put onto my CNC, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to lay out, and so I used a very similar technique for the cribbage board, laying it out on my CNC, and that may be another video sometime. But this video is going to focus on how do you take and scale something in your Vectric software so you get the right size of cut that you're looking for based on a picture. This is the process that I use for scaling that board to get a good feel for it, and it actually works out pretty well. I've used it on several projects. If you are trying to lay out something that's odd shaped and you want to get a certain profile in place, or in this case where the client knew it was 8 foot long but wasn't quite sure how wide it was and couldn't get the information from the originators. So let's go through real quick how I did that. So the first thing I knew was, let's set up the project. I'm in vCarve Pro here. I knew that it was going to be 8 feet long when I was done. So I took 9 feet and I added that in here. And if you can't remember how to do that, simply take 12 inches times 9 equals, gives you your 108 inches long. And I made it in the X direction, even though my machine wouldn't go that way and most machines would go Y, but it's easier for me to see, and then I can rotate it afterwards. And then the next thing I did was I said, well, I don't think it's going to be more than 2 feet wide. The boards I had in hand were 20 inches, and so I was hoping it wouldn't be, but by looking at the picture, I could kind of tell that it wasn't. The next thing I did was I placed it in the middle. All I'm trying to do is get a sizing for it. And so now I have my initial sizing of the background for the board. And so the next thing I need to do is bring in the picture that I'm going to base this off of. And so the way I do that is I come over here to the bitmap and I go to my pictures of that Facebook page. And I know that that's going to be the board. And I probably should have done this other step first, but it doesn't matter. The next thing I know is that I'm going to need at least an 8-foot long piece of wood. So this will be our scale box. And so 8 feet is not, 96 inches? Let's just make sure that we don't mess it up. 8 times 12 equals 96. And let me make this 20 inches wide in the Y direction. Apply. It doesn't really matter right now. We're going to be adjusting this Y direction in the next few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and center this just to make it easier to work with. No particular reason you have to, but it will just make things easier to work with as we go through this process. So the next thing I do is I've got that picture that I brought in, and so now I'm going to start with that picture. And I'm going to blow that picture up such that I can get a good feel for the actual size of that board. And the way I'm going to do that initially is I'm going to take that picture and I'm going to grab this handle and I'm going to line it up. Since it's a straightforward picture, I'm going to try to line it up so that that board is pretty parallel with that box that I built. It's 8 foot. So that looks pretty good to me right now. So now what I want to do is go ahead and from the diagonal start pulling it up in a way that the picture stays with the right ratio. That's important. You don't want to stretch it one way or the other, so you want to make sure that you're pulling it so that the aspect ratio stays the same, or you're going to lose the impact. So the next thing I'm going to do is I've made the picture too big at this point, so I'm going to pull it back down. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put that picture in this box so that this edge of the board on the left and the handle edge of the board are just touching the boundary box. And let me change the properties on this picture by right-clicking, and I'm going to fade it just a little bit more. Close. Okay, so I faded it just a little bit more to allow me to be able to see that handle. And now, if you look, you can see that handle is right on the edge of this line, and the board is hanging over just a little here, so just one more slight little adjustment should do it. And you'll notice I don't have snapping on so that it doesn't try to move my cursor to that area. Okay, so that's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm going to take, to validate, and I'm going to move this picture up. And I can move the picture or the box, either one, it doesn't matter. Whichever one seems to work easier. So you can see that I still have the box top in parallel. So now I'm going to move the box because I think it's going to be a little easier. I'm moving it, not scaling it, and I'm going to move it over just ever so slightly. Might be easier to use my cursor keys. So right there you can see that because we've got this edge in this area, I'm just splitting the difference right there on the left. Can you see that? Let's just splitting the difference right here because it's held at just a little angle, and this over here is right on the edge, so that's going to be pretty close to that board reflecting an 8-foot board or 96-inch board. So now the next step is I need to go ahead and make the box. This is what we didn't know. We knew it was 8 foot. What we didn't know was how long this was. So now I have that board bounded, and I can tell by looking at that right there that we're 96 inches long by 16.4. So I give or take this an inch. So I would say that we've got that board somewhere between 16 and 17 inches wide, and that was the original size of the board. And that was what I could tell the client was we'd go ahead and make that a 17 or 16-inch wide board, and in the end she wanted it to be 18 inches, and that worked out just fine. So that's how you can scale and look at the size. Now the next question you might say was, well, how big is the actual handle? And you have to look to see where you want to measure it from. So you can either measure it from simply doing a bounding box. Let me say this real quick. 8-foot scale. So if I crash, I don't lose everything. So we could do it a number of different ways. One is we could simply take a line. Well, probably the easier way, I think, is to take a rectangle, and I start from the edge of the board here, and I come across to right where the handle is coming down, and you can see it's off just a little bit. That's what we expected because of the angle of the board. Not perfectly right. But what you can see here is that the width or the length of the handle is approximately 23.5 to 24 inches from where the board top is until it slopes in and goes around. So that's what we would use as our scale. And that gives us what we need to actually start working with the board. Since I'm already in the program, I might as well go ahead and show you how I went and laid out the board so that we could actually cut it on Shane's CNC machine. And I love the tricks and tips we get from Becky and others at Vectric. And here's an example of a tip and trick that I totally make use of. So let me go through the process real quick. So the first thing I want to do is this box is on this picture is on its own bitmap layer. I'm going to go ahead and remove this box right here. The next thing I want to do is take this box and I'm just going to move it to a layer that I'll call frame. So I'm only using that for framing purposes and will take it away in the future. And let me make that a different color. I'm going to make that a red color. And so the next part of the frame that I want to work with is I want just half the board. I'm gonna trace out half of the board, and so that's what I want to do. I want to come over to make sure frame is highlighted. I'm going to grab a line, and I'm going to grab right here and let me go ahead and turn on the snapping now, and that's exactly half in it because you saw it turn. You see that dot? Okay, so I'm going to snap on that, and I'm just going to come straight across so that in the frame, I know what half the board is, and I see that it looks to me like it's just slightly off there. So I'm going to actually move the picture, now that I've got the width. I'm going to actually move the picture so the board looks exactly in the center. All right, now we've got that in place. So the next thing I want to do is actually go ahead and trace this board. And so the way I like to do it is a couple different methods. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a triangle that goes right from the center of this board and goes up to the edge. And I want to take this off for a second. And that triangle overlapped with the other one, which is going to make it a little harder to close. Now I'll see if I can grab the right triangle. I did. Click it twice, and I want to take the other triangle. Let me take the other triangle and move it out of the way for a second. Get it up out of the way. So this one I want to line up. Since we're halfway through the board, I'm going to take, and none of this is really critical because we're just kind of getting an approximate scale. We're designing our own board. And I want to take it down to where it's as close as possible. Now I have the triangle. And the next thing I want to do is I want to get this round edge on the charcuterie board. So I like to make use of the fillet tool. And let me just take a guess if that's going to be 1 inch radius. It's probably not. I'm going to hit normal fillet, and then we're going to go try that and see how it looks. That's not enough, so let's do 5 inches, which is probably too much, but we'll try it. Well, that's not too bad. I'd say that's a little too much, so we're going to go to 3. Alright, and that looks pretty good to me from a shape. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and take this area right here, and I'm going to put it right so it's just past that edge, right? So you can see I'm just past the edge, so that radius that I put in there, I'm going to do that again on this side. Alright, so that gives me basically the size of the board. I'm going to move it slightly. I'm going to hit the nodes. I'll copy over those nodes so they all move together. I'll move this over slightly, and now that looks better to me. And now I've got that big part of the board. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take, and I'm going to go just past the edge here, and I'm going to go to here. I'm going to go across here. Not too much, so I hit the backspace key. I went too far for myself. I didn't like that. I'm going to come over here. I'll come over here. And then I'll come right here at the edge, and I'll hit the right key or escape. So now I've got that shape for the handle started. Hit the node edit mode, and I'm going to go ahead and go over all of those so that they're all highlighted. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to put to Bezier. That makes these all Bezier curves, which it makes them easier to work with. So here we go. I'm working with this Bezier function, and that makes me able to use a smooth function. Not quite sure why that didn't switch. So it's going to smooth that right there. And so now I'm going to come up just a little, and now we have a nice smooth angle here. Just play around with that a little bit. And on this one, I'm going to want to, eventually I'm going to want to smooth these together. I'll do that in just a second. I've got this here. It's smooth, smooth, smooth. I'm pressing the S key as I click on the, so I pressed the S key as I was clicking on that actual data point. And I'm going to highlight these and put smooth there. So we have nice smooth points, and you can see we've got a nice smooth handle. We probably want to move this handle in just a little bit right here, and then we'll adjust this out just a touch. Adjust this out just a touch, so it's going to come nice and square down there. This out just a touch. Again, this is all personal choice and how it appeals to the eye. So now that we have that all laid out, the next thing we want to do is just get this profile in place. So I'm going to use the scissor tool, which is the interactive vector trim tool, and I'm going to click here, click here, click here, click here, and then I'm going to click right here. And what that does, by the way, you'll notice I've got repair, rejoin, trim sections. So that now makes everywhere where I clipped one vector. As you can see, it's one vector. It's not closed yet, but it's one vector. So the next thing I want to do is I want to adjust this little section so there's a smooth transition. So I'm selecting those two, and I'm going to hit the S key, or you could hit a right key. Oh, try it again here. You either hit the S key or you could hit the right mouse button and hit smooth points, and that will smooth those out, and you saw how that smoothed that out. And so now I'm just going to move that up a little bit, move this out a little bit, hit smooth here, move this one up a little, and smooth that. Oops, not quite like that. Play with a little bit here. Okay, that has a pretty nice smooth transition right there. I like that. And now that we've done that, the next step to do is to, and since it's not perfectly centered where I have the picture, the next thing I want to do is I want to take and put a line right across the center of where we had that board. Straight across. A zero angle. That click. I want to get rid of this little hangout, and you can see that that line is just slightly away from that, so I'm going to move it so it just kisses that half. That's close enough in my book. So the next thing I want to do is get the other half of that charcuterie board, and I'm going to select escape. I accidentally selected the picture, so I want to select this vector right here. I'm going to use the flip function. I'm going to not flip about job center, I'm going to flip about a line, which means I need to select a line, that one I just created. So I just created that line. I'm going to make sure I have a mirrored copy, so I want to flip about the line right here. So since I selected that line, that's where it goes. Hit close, and now what I have is both sides. Let me turn off the picture so it doesn't get in the way. So now what I have is the actual board. So I'm actually going to change this from frame now to a new layer called board outline. So now that I have the board outline, I can actually get rid of these frames and lines. So to do that, I can either delete them or I can just turn them off, and I turn them off and you see the shape of the board. But that's not complete yet because remember there's two halves. So the next thing I want to do is I want to select, hit the shift key and select both halves. And I'm going to join by moving the endpoints, or I could right-click, join, by move endpoints, because that's why I had those endpoints so close to each other. Let's see if it's closed yet or if I need one more operation. So it's still open because I just joined it. So now I'm going to right-click again, hit this again, and I'm going to say move endpoints. And the endpoints have moved, and now we should have a closed vector. And as you can see, we've got a closed vector. And so now we actually know exactly how the board's laid out. Let's bring back the picture of the board. And you can see that the board is laid in there pretty good. There is a slight difference because of the way I made the frame just above it. Let me move the picture up. But that's going to be pretty close right there, especially for the board that we're going to do. And then the only other thing we need is to build the handle hole. So I'm going to take a circle, and I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to put handle hole, and I'm going to make sure it's selected. I'm going to come over here in the center, and I'm going to, oops, I clicked and let off, so I'm going to hit it in the center, and I'm going to open that up and see that that's about the right size. So I'll say it's a 3-inch diameter hole. Hit apply, hit close, and now I have the handle. Now just to make sure it's in the right spot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the handle, and then I'm going to select this section right here, and I'm going to go to the alignment tool, and I'm going to align it to the selection in the horizontal direction, and you see it move just ever so slightly. So that tells me I've got this thing located pretty darn close for now, and I'm ready then to set up the tool paths and all the other things that I'm going to do, and that will be in a separate video. All I really was going to cover in this video originally was, and I'm going to turn this off again, all I originally was going to cover was how you take something from a picture that you take and you size it to the right dimension so you can do the rest of the project. The main purpose of this video was to go through a process of how you would take a picture and use it to scale a project or a product that you're trying to create. I hope we accomplished that. That's what I was trying to do. And it was a pretty straightforward and easy process. A couple key things to remember is to get the best results for scaling, the picture needs to be pretty straightforward and flat on. Because that individual was looking straight at the camera when they took the picture, it made it possible for us to actually scale that charcuterie board. If he was at a different angle, then the scaling process wouldn't have worked as well. And it was slightly tilted, and that's created some challenges, but nothing major. And I'm fairly confident that the scale of our project, our end charcuterie board, is very close to what the original was, which is what the client wanted. I hope you found some of these tips and tricks helpful. The other tip, when you're actually designing a project that's going to be symmetrical in shape, is to only design half of the project, whether you design the left half, the right half, the bottom half, or the top half, as we did in this project, and then flip about a vertical line or a horizontal line, or flip about the job center if you've centered everything, is the easiest way to make sure you have a nice symmetrical project. If you liked what you saw in this video, I would appreciate you giving me a thumbs up, sharing the video with others, and or commenting on things you would like to see. If you would like me to make another video where Shane and I go through the actual jointing and cutting of this charcuterie board, I'd be glad to do that. Also filling the knots and how I build the rest of the board. So if you want that, please put that in the comments section. I'm trying to build this channel a little bit. Please subscribe and share this information with others and get them to come over and take a look at the channel. And if you subscribe, then you'll get notifications when I do release the videos. I don't release them every week because I'm busy building projects, and the editing process for me is not simple and straightforward as I hear some others are able to do it. I just don't have that skill set. I'm building it, but I would appreciate any support that you can provide in that way. Hope you have a great day. Until we meet back again in this medium, have a wonderful life.